Halloween time. Super scary. Yay! I'm Vecna, scary man from Stranger Things, with the most uncomfortable mask in the world.
Happy Halloween, guys. I'm gonna rank Resident Evil games, which has nothing to do with this, except for the gloopiness. There's a lot of gloopiness in Resident Evil. So let's not fanny about. Happy Halloween. Let's talk about some scary games. Oh, that's heavy. That's heavy stuff. Oh, okay. Am I still in the frame? I've got a Vecna thing on this as well. He's tucked in here, but it looks even worse than the mask. So I just got a Vecna one piece and I got a mask separate. That ain't staying on my head tonight for this party that we're having. So here we are. I'm a big fan of the Resident Evil games. I've grown up playing Resident Evil from the very first game to where we are now, RE8 Village. 8 sounds like a lot of games. There's more than 8 games. As you can see on the screen, there are plenty of games to choose. There are many subtitles. Is that what you'd call them? What would you call them? Not mainline. There's a lot of just random games. Capcom always release random Resident Evil games. And I've played majority of them. I don't think there's many that I haven't played, but we'll soon find out. Starting with Resident Evil Survivor. I've touched this a little bit, so it's not in the not played bit. I will move Resident Evil Survivor. I'm not going to fanny about too much, hopefully, with these side games. It's pants. Let's just keep it super simple. Anyone that's played Resident Evil Survivor, it's pants. They made it first person. I think it was the first time Capcom delved into first person, and it is for the PlayStation. It did come out maybe about 2099, maybe. It's not great. I've played a little bit of it. It's not great. It's clunky. Characters aren't very memorable. They tried something, it didn't work. It's as simple as that. Speaking of trying something and it didn't work, Resident Evil Gaiden for the Game Boy, which would have come out roughly around the same time. I could probably put it in not played. I've touched it, kind of the same as Survivor, but I think I've touched it enough to know that it is also pants. This is not going to a good start for what I consider probably my favourite series ever. But Resident Evil Gaiden is not great. It's the first one that's set on a ship. I think you control Barry Burton, which makes no sense because on the cover of the box is Leon from the second game. When you have like an encounter with a zombie or something, it cuts into like a first person perspective again, and then there's like a little bar that does this, and you've got to hit it in the middle or something so you can hit an accurate shot on the zombie. It's not very good. It's not a fun game. Resident Evil Dead Aim, I don't think I've actually played it, so that will go into not played because I can't comprehend. And rather disappointingly, Resident Evil Outbreak, I have also not actually properly played. Resident Evil Outbreak and Outbreak File 2, which was like, it was definitely Capcom's first, or Resident Evil's first foray into getting online play back on the PlayStation 2, this was. So it was very ahead of its time from what I've heard of it. And they are actually quite good Resident Evil games from what I've heard. But I've never actually played them myself. And it's kind of annoying that I've never played them myself because they seem like... I'm a big old school Resident Evil guy, as you will see soon when I get to those games. And they were sort of like the last couple games that went that sort of fixed camera perspective route, which I think are the superior Resident Evil games. But yeah, unfortunately, I haven't actually played them. Same goes for these, Umbrella Chronicles and the Dark Side Chronicles, which were on-rail shooters, and I'm not a big on-rail shooters guy. I don't mind playing Time Crisis in an arcade, or Silent Scope, or whatever it is. In an arcade, it's fun in that environment. On my console, in the house, chilled out on the sofa, I don't want to be moving a cursor around, an aiming cursor around to shoot baddies. That's not Resident Evil for me. That's not what I play Resident Evil for. So I've never really been interested in them. I'm going to be shocking the world now, probably, but Resident Evil The Mercenaries 3D for the Nintendo 3DS, which only came out, it was probably actually about 10 years ago now, but I really enjoyed this game. I really enjoyed it. There is basically a mode, for those that don't know, there is a mode in Resident Evil called the Mercenaries, which you tend to get once you complete the main game. You unlock a secret mode called the Mercenaries. And what that tends to be is like either waves of zombies for a certain amount of time, and you've got to kill them and rack up a big score. In Resident Evil 3, when they did it the first time, back in 1999, it was almost like a bit of a side quest where you'd start point A and you'd have to get to point B before the time runs out. On the way, there'd be loads of baddies and stuff, and the more you kill, the bigger your score gets, and you got to choose different characters who had different guns and different abilities, and it was quite fun. And the Mercenaries 3D was the first time they made just a whole game out of it. It's not the biggest game, it's not the most amazing game, it's not the 3DS's best game, but for what it was, I really enjoyed myself with it. And it did have online capabilities. You got to play with people online, so you could rack up some massive scores. It was a fun game. I was very pleased with that when I got that. Operation Raccoon City, I don't really want to put it in pants, because like the concept is actually quite good, and it controlled well enough. It's just graphically it wasn't anything special. It was a bit of a mess. I'd probably put it in alright, like bottom of the barrel alright, because I don't want to say it's not pants. I mean, pants is reserved for a game that's coming up very soon, really, apart from the two that are already in there. But that's just the two that are already in pants, where they tried something at the time and it didn't work out, in my opinion. Operation Raccoon City was just trying to jump on the almost Left 4 Dead 2 bandwagon a little bit, but in the Resident Evil universe, and it just didn't really, again, there's another one that didn't quite work out, but I still enjoyed myself. I've played it a couple times. I've enjoyed myself, but I get why people don't like it. And then bottom of the barrel pants is this piece of crap. Umbrella Corps was where they seemed to go full on esports with Resident Evil, which I don't get why you would attempt that. But even then, it's shocking. Do not waste your money. Do not waste your time downloading this game. It is horrendous. It's basically just another kind of... It's like the Mercenaries, only they tried making it like a more competitive feel, and like the camera angle seems to be like right on their ear hole like this, and it's like looking there. And then when they're aiming the gun, it's like they're aiming like this. It's really stupid. It's such a bad game. These two I've not played. I remember getting a download of Resident Evil Resistance with... Is it Resident Evil 3, the remake of 3? And then it got massively delayed, and then so I never really ever got around to playing it. Unless it's this I'm thinking of, Reverse, which is another multiplayer. These are both multiplayer Resident Evil titles. Not what I'm interested in, especially when it comes to this franchise, because as we will now delve into, what is left are your more mainline. Some of them are still side games, but these are what I consider the mainline Resident Evil games, and most of these are going to start filling up the top of the screen, I'm sure. So, now we got that bit out of the way. Let's start from the beginning. The origins. Resident Evil from 1996, based on a Super Famicom game called Sweet Home from 1989, I believe. Quick knowledge, quick maths. I grew up terrified of this game. It did its job. It was terrifying, but I couldn't stop myself from either watching my dad, my uncle, and my cousin playing it, and playing it myself when I got a bit older. It is easily S+++, top tier. It is the one that started it. It still holds up now. It's rough, but it's iconic for me. It is, but maybe I'm being a bit too kind putting in S+++. It's top of damn good. There's a lot of other games that I need to praise more, probably, but I really want to put in S+++, but I probably shouldn't, and I should hold off. Resident Evil 2, Yes, it has to be, doesn't it? It has to be S+++. It's a step up from the first one. There's a lot of aspects of the first Resident Evil that I prefer over Resident Evil 2. The location. I found it scarier in general. There's just little bits that I preferred over why I preferred Resident Evil over 2. But in all fairness, Resident Evil 2 was a big step up. They basically gave you 4 campaigns to play. 2 characters with 2 scenarios. So you can play them in whatever order. And there's just little changes. And it's still, to this day, super scary. It's still playable. It's not even dated. Graphically, PlayStation 1 graphics now are rough. But it also works with the horrorness, the spookiness. It's just, there's something unnerving about PlayStation 1 graphics. As I've said since I've been playing Silent Hill 1, streaming and putting them on YouTube, there's something really unnerving about PS1 graphics, and it just works so well for horror games. Resident Evil 3, this is tough. Growing up, this was my favourite Resident Evil. I love the Nemesis character. I love the fact that this guy could just show up anywhere. And he just ruins your game. He can just show up and ruin your game. But in like a good way, because it scared the crap out of you, and he had such a cool design. I will have to put it in S+++++, just because this is why it's hard for me not to put the first Resident Evil, but there is a reason why I can't put it. Those 3 games were a massive part of my childhood, and I was a big wuss when it came to horror stuff. I didn't want to see anything horror, watch anything horror, listen to anything horror, really. Michael Jackson's Thriller kept me up one night when I saw the music video the first time. It absolutely terrified me when he turns into a zombie. I was that much of a pansio, but I still played Resident Evil. There was still something mesmerizing about Resident Evil, and I still love him to this day. We're going into the PlayStation 2 era and the Dreamcast, which, my cousin had it on for a long time, which is where we played it. Resident Evil Code Veronica is a really, 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 really good Resident Evil game. I can't put it in S+++, because it does have its sort of, oh god, this is where I go. Yeah, there we go. It's in damn good. They sort of made, it was more of a dynamic fixed camera perspective. It was no longer, the original 3, the backdrops and the rooms and the settings and everything were all still photographs. I don't know the best way to explain it, but that's how they rendered everything. It was still photographs, and then there'd be little points of contact and stuff for the player. Code Veronica was the first time where everything was the graphics. The environment was all done not as still photographs, and it looked amazing for the time. It still looks decent now, to be fair. It's old now, but I just think I never really got massively invested in the storyline back then. It was not a patch on the original 3 for me, but still a really, really good game, and hopefully it gets a remaster at some point. I really think they should have remastered this game way before Resident Evil 4, which is the next remaster coming in March. But we'll get to that shortly. But first, they remastered Resident Evil 1 in 2002. And this is potentially, yeah, I'd say so. This may be my favourite game of all time. I absolutely love this game, and I was a bit late to the party with it. Again, going back to me being a bit of a pansio growing up, I didn't want to touch Resident Evil games beyond the first 3 because I was too scared. But then when I played this, I fell in love, and I played it a billion times, finished it a billion times with both Jill and Chris. It has different modes, and it's got True Survivor mode, where the item boxes in it where you store your stuff are not linked or connected. So whatever box you put your items in, you then have to go back to that specific box to get those specific items. It's really good. It really made you think about your next move in the game, because there is like a big strategic aspect to Resident Evil games, like the item management and stuff, and ammo conservation and things like that. And this is a near perfect game for me. It's actually really creepy. They added a lot to the original storyline, which actually improved on it. Graphically, it was amazing for the time. It proper wowed me, the graphics. It was an amazing looking game for its time. And it still looks good now, and I bloody love it. And after that, we got Resident Evil 0 for the Nintendo GameCube. Again, really good. Kind of, I put it along the same lines as Code Veronica. There's little aspects to each of them that just aren't as good as the other games. But what Resident Evil 0 introduced to the series was a co-op style of play. But it was one-player co-op, so you had two characters and you could switch between either one. They both had different items. They both had their own item management thing. And they both, Billy was the big tough guy, so he could withstand a bit more damage. Rebecca was the only one that could mix chemicals, mix herbs, because she's a medic and she's the only one who knows how to make medicine or whatever. But yeah, it was okay. Creepy. A lot of the enemies, a lot of the bosses are pretty bland in it. They're kind of just like infected animals or whatever. There's no like iconic Resident Evil enemy in the game. But it's basically just a lead up to the first game, just how you get to know how Rebecca gets to where she is in the first one. Good game. Resident Evil 4, though I consider it very overrated, I do think it's a very overrated game. It is still a phenomenal game. It is still S+++++. It is still a superb game. I just don't think it's as amazing as a lot of the world thinks. It still does what it does better than any other game. And the amount of games that then went on to try and replicate what Resident Evil 4 did, they basically changed the whole thing. They changed the game. They made it third-person perspective, over-the-shoulder third-person perspective. Gave it a cool new sort of aiming mechanic, which at the time, and I think that's what it was for me at the time. It's like they changed Resident Evil, and I was like, oh no, I don't do that. Don't change my favorite games ever. So I held off. Also down to me being a Panzio and that again. But when I played it, it's phenomenal. It's such a good game. I just think it's a little bit overrated, little teeny bit, but it is phenomenal. Also getting a remake in March, which looks unbelievable graphically. It's just whether they can capture the essence and the eeriness and just the fun factor of the original Resident Evil 4, which I am considering doing once I'm able to finish Silent Hill due to lack of batteries in my house. I can't even play the Xbox for the minute because I got no batteries for the pad. But when I finish Silent Hill, I'm strongly I'm strongly considering playing Resident Evil 4 as sort of a build-up to getting the remake, which I'm really looking forward to. And that's not till March, so I got plenty of time to do it. Resident Evil 5, I really, 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 really want to put it in S+++. It's just whether it does warrant. Resident Evil 5 is very special to me. This was the Resident Evil game that got me back into Resident Evil. I played the first 3 growing up. I then hit like a patch where I wasn't much interested in what else new came out, like your remake for starters and Resident Evil 4. Because I wasn't interested in horror. I was not interested in horror one bit. And then it just got to a point when I was in college, when I started college, I started delving more into horror stuff. I used to like reading up about horror films and horror stories, and so it's like I was sort of easing myself into the world of horror. And then just one day, just on a whim, I just found it quite cheap in a game shop. I just went for a nosy in a game shop and saw Resident Evil 5 for like, I don't know at the time, probably like £5 or a tenner. So this was fresh-ish, because I know Resident Evil 6 hadn't come out at this point, but Resident Evil 5 was my return to the series, and I bloody loved it. It's not a scary game. It's not a scary Resident Evil, which is its biggest letdown. I want the creeps. But there's no denying They went way more action orientated. I think they already did this with 4, but get away with it a little bit, which is why I also say it's a bit overrated. But 5, they go almost all out on the action, and it's really fun. It's a really fun game. And when you have a co-op partner, because they actually made the co-op 2-player online as well, if you've got a co-op partner, it's such a fun game. You can have such a laugh with it. And luckily, my best mate that I met in college, who I've done a few videos on this channel for, talking about old games, when me and Nick first started becoming pally, this was the game that we played together. Resident Evil 5. Got home from college, banged out some Resident Evil 5. And for sick nostalgia purposes, this bad boy is going S+++. It's amazing. Get on Resident Evil 5 if you've not played it. Resident Evil Revelations. I love Revelations. I even played it this morning. And it's simply, there's one reason, right? I'm not even hesitating. There's one reason Revelations gets into S++, and it introduced a mode called Raid Mode. That was the first time they'd done it in Resident Evil. I think they've only done it twice for this in Revelations 2. And it's basically just the Mercenaries mode from Resident Evil 3 back in 1999. They sort of expanded on that and just made it different areas of the game. They'd give you a little task to do, and then to get to A to B, for example, and sometimes from A to B to C. And there'd be loads of enemies around, and then you kill enemies, you get points, and then you can unlock weapons, and then you level up and stuff. And it was basically a whole other game on top of the campaign, and it was just really, really, really fun. And I spent eternity playing this game on the Nintendo 3DS. The 3D was quite impressive, it didn't need it, but this was a whole Resident Evil game and a sub game on top of it on the little 3DS handheld console. And then when it got ported to the PlayStation 3 and that, and PS4 and now PS5, it's a much better experience chilling out on your sofa and playing some Revelations. Now we're just going to skip past this one. Resident Evil 6 is shocking. It is not a good game. It's not good. And this was my first Resident Evil since getting back into the series. This was the first one coming up that I was super excited for. Could not wait to play. It's horrendous. It's not good. I couldn't even explain it to you. You've kind of just got to play Resident Evil 6 to understand just how bad it is. It starts off quite well. If you play Leon's campaign, I think Leon's campaign is as close as they get to being a good game. I wouldn't say any more than that. It's good. From that point onwards, it gets lower and lower and down and down. It's not a good game. Just avoid Resident Evil 6 at all costs. Resident Evil Revelations 2 is alright. I'm having a hard time. There we go. Resident Evil Revelations 2 is alright. Again, because I loved Revelations 1 so much, I was super hyped up, super excited for this. They released it episodically. I can't remember how it was done, but it was like the Telltale games, the Walking Dead and The Wolf Among Us and that. They released it episodically, and I can't remember if I had to wait for the last episode to be released, because I'm a physical copy guy. I still like getting my discs and stuff and having the library. I can't remember. I might have had to have waited for the last episode to come out for the full release physical disc to be released, which is already a down note for me. It's not great. The story is not great. The controls are, what's the opposite of improvement? Is downgraded. The controls just aren't. It doesn't feel like Revelations. I like the control of Revelations. It's very simple, very easy. No messing. They just kind of tweak it in the wrong way for me in Revelations 2. The enemies are more annoying than creepy. And then the raid modes, the raid mode's just not the same. It's like, again, they tried too much with it and it didn't quite work out. Revelations 2 is just a bit of a letdown, basically. So it's alright, it's playable. Resident Evil 7 Biohazard, which I have played on this channel. I don't know if I put it up on YouTube, but you just have to check out the GAC Twitch account. I've got my whole Resident Evil 7 playthrough on there. It's amazing. Resident Evil 7 is amazing. I'll put it in damn good. It's really good. Again, they did the same thing they did with RE4. They changed the game. They made it first person. The first time since Dead Aim. No, the Umbrella Chronicles and that really. But they're on-rail shooters and not first-person shooters. But they went there, and what I do respect is they did go down the horror route more. I think they realised they messed up with Resident Evil 6. So they went full-on horror with Resident Evil 7. And it's phenomenal. It's such a good game. It doesn't quite have the magic of the originals for me. 1 through 5 and Revelations are all superior to it for me. I know a lot of people are going to be like, how can you put Resident Evil 5 ahead of 7? Oh my god. I had more fun with Resident Evil 5, going to be super honest. But Resident Evil 7 is really good. Alongside it, I'd put Village, Resident Evil 8, the latest release. In certain aspects, a bit of an improvement. Maybe the controls were a bit more fluid, the gunplay was a bit more fun. But it's kind of just the same thing. It's just Resident Evil 7 again, but in like a European village. So it's like they tried to get the Resident Evil 4 vibes. Again, that's what I sort of took from it. They were trying to harness the magic of Resident Evil 4 again, but in a first-person perspective. It's good. It gets to a point where it basically becomes the action game as opposed to the horror game. And it's okay. It's well, obviously it's damn good, but I think I probably was left a little disappointed after it, but still a fun game. You know, I did start live streaming it once, and I just never got around to carrying it on, to be honest. But hey-ho, it's the way it goes sometimes. Resident Evil 2 Remake is absolutely phenomenal. It's a great remake of Resident Evil 2. Very faithful. The addition, even though he's in Resident Evil, the original Resident Evil 2, but making Mr. X a more prominent character and giving him that nemesis role from Resident Evil 3 is like a stroke of genius, as they say. It absolutely creeped me out when that happened. And there's basically a period of the game where it's mostly set in a police station, and there's a period of the game where Mr. X is basically stalking you and hunting you throughout this police station, and you can just turn up anywhere, and like hearing the sounds of his big fat boots stomping around in the distance, it's unnerving and horrifying. It's just a superb game. I personally would still put the original Resident Evil 2 ahead of it, but I can understand anyone that says, no, Resident Evil 2 Remake is far superior. I get it, don't worry. And then last but not least, Resident Evil 3 Remake. Bit of a letdown, but still can't deny it's an amazing game. A lot of cut content from the original 3, so it's not as faithful a remake as 2 was. A very short game, that's what everyone's biggest gripe with it is. But don't forget, the original Resident Evil 3 wasn't the longest game in the world, because it obviously started off as the side game that Code Veronica ended up being, because Code Veronica was supposed to be Resident Evil 3. Ooh. But still, Resident Evil 3 just basically sort of controls more or less exactly the same as Resident Evil 2. A little more action-y. But I think a lot of us die-hard fans were disappointed because, like, cutting out the clock tower from Resident Evil 3, the clock tower is one of the creepiest environments probably in any game ever, not just in the Resident Evil 3 game. But to completely cut that out was really weird. It just felt like a lot of little bits were missing. I didn't find Nemesis as threatening as he was in the original game. I didn't find him as threatening as Mr. X from Resident Evil 2. So I think they messed up Nemesis a little bit. They sort of altered his look, the design of Nemesis, and they made him look a bit meh. Because I think original Nemesis from 99 is like one of the coolest looking enemies ever. And remake Nemesis is just a bit meh. They did something to him and they just make him look a bit dopey. But still an amazing game. I mean, just looking at it overall here, 7 in each, S+++. So 40, I'm considering 14 Resident Evil games as pretty damn amazing games, which is why it's my favourite series. And like even the 2 alrights, Operation Raccoon City, Revelations 2, are still good games. They're alright. That's why I've put them in alright. There's only 4 you need to avoid, and there's another 7 there that I've not properly either not played or not properly played. So there's still more Resident Evil for me to explore, and it's my favourite series. But anyway, that's it. That's a quickish Halloween special from Gak, ranking all the Resident Evil games that we've had so far. At this moment in time, I am considering Resident Evil 4 as my next playthrough on our Twitch live streams, once I finish Silent Hill. But yeah, let me know what would you guys do with your rankings? Did I put too many in S+++? Is there not enough in the pants category? There's a lot of people that don't like Resident Evil, so let me know. And until next time, there'll be more GAC rankings and stuff to come. I just gotta have the time and ideas, basically. But stick your suggestions down below in the comments, and hit us up on the Instagrams here and let me know what you guys think. Cheers, guys. Thanks for watching. See you later.
Thank you.